Hello and welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm going to show you how to make your own focaccia at home. There was one thing that really inspired me to start making bread at home and to make this video as well. I walked into the grocery store one day and saw this shit, and if you ever ordered a little piece of focaccia from somewhere, it probably costs about as much as one of these. So I came home and made my own. I started by preparing the yeast with 1/4 cup of warm water, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and stirring to dissolve it just a little bit, and then adding 2 1/4 teaspoons of dry yeast. This is the same as one of those little packets if you buy those. Now we'll set this aside for about 10 minutes, and then grab a bowl and start putting our other ingredients together. We'll start with 4 cups of flour. I recommend using bread flour, but all-purpose flour will work fine too. Next we're adding 1 tablespoon of salt. Then I'll grab my yeast mixture, which will look like this if everything was done correctly. If you don't see this foam, that means your water was either too hot or too cold, or your yeast was expired. Now I'll add this to the flour and salt, making sure I get as much of it as I can in there. After the yeast has been added, I'll then add 1 3/4 cups of room temperature water. Once all the water is in, we're going to mix everything together. Now this may take a couple minutes, but over time you'll start to see the flour absorbing the water. Don't worry, there is actually enough water in there. At the end of this step, there shouldn't be any dry flour left. The dough will not be smooth, that's fine if it's not. And it will also be very sticky at the end. So once you have it all mixed together, it should look something like this. It might look a little rough to you at first, but this is what we want. Now we will grab our bottle of olive oil. We'll be using a decent amount of this in this recipe. Now pour in about 2 to 3 tablespoons of the olive oil and start to incorporate it into the dough. As you can see, I'm not measuring the oil exactly. That's because we're adding enough in to make sure that the dough doesn't dry out. So now I'm going to cover the dough and let it sit for at least 20 minutes to rise. Each time that we let it rest, you'll see that it will increase in size, and as long as you added enough olive oil, it shouldn't look dry at all. So now there's a little bit of a process that we're going to have to do. It's kind of a light kneading process where we'll take the dough, stretch it out, fold it over itself, turn it 1/4, repeat the process until we do 4 turns and folds. And then we'll cover it again with our plastic wrap and let it sit again for 20 minutes. After that 20 minutes, we'll uncover the dough and repeat the stretch and fold process again. We are actually going to do this a total of 4 times, letting it sit for 20 minutes each time. Now after that last 20-minute wait, I folded the dough one more time and then added some more olive oil on top. I would say about another 2 to 3 tablespoons, but make sure it's enough to completely cover the dough. Now use your hands to rub all the oil in and make sure that the dough is completely coated. You should notice that the dough is starting to look a lot more smooth compared to how we first started. Once it's coated in oil, we're going to cover it one more time and place it in the fridge, preferably overnight, but at least 10 hours. If you don't have quite that much time or patience, you can wait until the dough about doubles in size and then you can move on to the next step. You should be able to see that some very big air bubbles formed while the dough was sitting. This means that the yeast was doing its job. Now we're going to start to gently separate the dough from the bowl by kind of shaking it around and then gently using our fingers to remove it from the sides. During this time, some of the larger air bubbles will pop, and that's okay. The dough should now look nice and smooth and still moist from being covered by that olive oil. Now I'm going to grab a 9 by 13 inch pan, and as you might have guessed, grab some more olive oil and coat the bottom of the pan. You could use some butter as well to really make sure that the dough doesn't stick. Now I'm going to transfer the dough from the bowl into the pan. Now I'm going to use my hands to gently stretch the dough towards the edges of the pan. The dough is still cold, so it won't stretch too much right now, but it will start to stretch more over time. After this first stretch, we'll let it sit for at least an hour. You can go up to 2 or 3, but after that, we'll preheat our oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Now take your hands and hold them like you have some claws. Then we're going to go ahead and insert our fingertips into the dough and start making some dimples. You should be pressing your fingertips pretty deep into the dough and going all around the entire surface of it. While I'm doing this, I'm also lightly stretching the dough out so that it reaches the edges of the pan as well. It should be much easier to stretch now that it's been sitting out at room temperature for a while. Now we're going to add just a little bit more olive oil on top. This is the last time, and we're going to grab a brush and start brushing it over the top of the dough to coat it completely. If you have some oil pooled in the corners of the pan, you can also use that as well. So we're going to keep going with the brush until you have a nice even coating of olive oil on top of the focaccia. Now after that, I'm going to do one more quick round of putting some dimples into the dough, just to make sure that we have them throughout the entire focaccia. As you can see, I'm making sure that I don't miss any spots at all. Now once that's done, I'm going to add some nice flaky salt right on top. This is also when you can put on any other toppings you might want, like garlic, rosemary, tomatoes, or if you're feeling really creative, you can do some focaccia art. Maybe I'll try it one day. Let me know if you'd be interested in seeing that. But for this one, I'm keeping it simple and just putting a little bit of salt on to give it some extra flavor. And now our focaccia is finally ready to go in the oven. I should have made sure I wasn't storing anything in there first, but could have been worse. Now that I've removed that very hot baking sheet, the focaccia is finally ready to go into the oven. So we're going to put it into the middle rack and let it bake for at least 25 minutes. I went in to check the focaccia after about 20 minutes, and you can see that while it's baking, it's still rising. And now after 5, maybe 10 more minutes, the focaccia is finally ready. I will admit that this is somewhat of a long process, but it is simple and it's really worth it at the end. It's a great golden brown color and smells so good. I'm ready for a piece right now. But the first thing I had to do was actually get the focaccia unstuck from the pan. It wasn't too bad, but I really had to go around the entire length of the pan to get it loose. It would have helped to grease the pan with a little bit of butter earlier. But I did finally manage to get it out and transferred it over to a cutting board. Mostly in one piece. Now that it's out of the pan, you can let it sit and cool for a few minutes if you want. I know it's been a long process to get to this point, so I can understand if you want to cut into this right away. Something that I actually did myself. I just went ahead and cut a corner off. You can actually see that it's still steaming as I'm cutting it, but I couldn't wait to try it. As you can see, the focaccia is so light and soft. You can use it to make some great sandwiches or just eat it right now by itself. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more delicious food tutorials that can hopefully also help you save some money. Thank you very much for watching this video and making it to the end. I hope to see you again in another video.